Hello everyone. Today I'm bringing you back to the story of Tusan, a simple single mother. It's a story of days that pass slowly, familiar mornings, quiet worries, and emotions that feel real and close to life. Let's continue following Tusan to better feel her gentle yet resilient rhythm of living, where every small moment carries its own story and unspoken feelings. The morning began with the familiar rhythm of Tusan and little Ivy, unfolding slowly and steadily like any other day. Nothing felt particularly different, yet it always carried its own quiet sense of reassurance. Tusan woke up early, accustomed to the stillness of the morning hours, when everything around her had yet to fully stir. She quietly tidied the small kitchen, wiped down the table, and prepared everything neatly, each movement orderly and familiar, before gently waking her child. When Ivy sat down at the table, Tusan took a seat beside her, tenderly feeding her bread, slowly breaking it into smaller pieces and patiently encouraging Ivy to eat on her own. She did not do it for her, only observed and adjusted just enough, allowing her child to finish the meal in the most natural way possible. Whenever Ivy was clumsy, moved slowly, or dropped a few crumbs, Tusan simply reminded her softly, her voice never raised or rushed, her eyes always resting on her child with a familiar gentleness and compassion. After the meal, Tusan took the new dress she had prepared earlier and carefully changed Ivy into it. She adjusted each fold, straightened the hem, and gently smoothed her child's slightly messy hair, every gesture unhurried and attentive. Throughout it all, Tusan continued talking to her daughter in a warm, intimate tone, her simple words flowing naturally, like a habit repeated over countless mornings. Each small action, each familiar gesture followed seamlessly after another, quietly reflecting the patient care and warm love that Tusan always devoted to little Ivy. Elsewhere, Tone was busy caring for his ailing mother, and, because of that, the rhythm of life in the house had slowed, no longer keeping the steady routine it once had. Everything, big or small, now seemed to revolve around her health, from meals and sleep to brief moments of rest. Early in the morning, while the house was still quiet and the air remained hushed, Tone went to the market. He walked past familiar stalls, stopping to choose carefully among the chickens, examining each one closely, asking a few questions before finally deciding on the freshest to bring home. His steps were unhurried, as if he wanted to be certain that even the smallest choices were made properly. Back at home, Tone cleaned the chicken himself and prepared the ingredients, every movement familiar yet never careless. He placed the pot of porridge on the stove, adjusted the heat, and stood nearby, watching as it simmered gently. From time to time, he leaned in to look into the pot, stirring lightly, paying attention to every small change, every wisp of steam rising, hoping only that the porridge would be cooked thoroughly and soft enough for his mother to eat with ease. That time passed slowly, carried by his quiet concentration. When it was time to leave the house to make it to work, Tone hesitated for a moment, his gaze lingering as if something still unsettled him. He turned to remind his father to keep an eye on the pot, repeating each small instruction, from maintaining an even flame to knowing when to turn off the stove, his voice hurried yet filled with a concern he could not quite hide. The repetition was not born of distrust, but of a heart that still could not find peace. Despite having arranged everything as carefully and thoroughly as possible, a heaviness remained within him. His mother was still upset, still holding on to her familiar silence and refusing to speak to him, making the atmosphere in the house even more subdued. That unspoken weight pressed quietly on Tone, following him with every step as he left the house, seeping into his thoughts, so that even the busyness outside could not ease the heaviness he carried within. The atmosphere in Tone's family grew tense and heavy as his parents began to argue over a truth that had been hidden for a long time. The conversation took place behind closed doors, without shouting or open hostility at first, yet every word was spoken slowly and weighed down with gravity, making the air in the house feel tightly compressed. The pauses between their exchanges only sharpened the sense of strain. Gradually, the truth was addressed directly, no longer avoided. Trang was pregnant, but the child she was carrying was not Tone's. That fact alone was enough to set emotions colliding within the room, making it difficult for anyone to remain composed. Tone's mother objected fiercely, her voice unable to conceal the tension and pent-up frustration within her. She repeatedly emphasized her refusal to accept the situation, insisting that her son raising another man's child was something she simply could not bear. In her mind, it was not only a personal hurt, but something that exceeded the limits of what she could endure, leaving her feeling wronged and deeply aggrieved. Her objections were voiced again and again, layered with anger and pain, revealing that she was in no way ready to yield or accept the reality unfolding before her. On the other side, Tone's father tried to keep his voice calmer, choosing his words carefully as he reasoned and attempted to persuade. He neither denied the truth nor tried to conceal or soften it, but hoped the situation could be approached with greater restraint and rationality. In every sentence, his concern for his son was evident, along with his desire to protect Tone's happiness and prevent matters from being pushed too far, risking fractures within the family that might prove impossible to mend. Tone went to see Hai to hand over his work and request a short leave to prepare for the wedding that was drawing very near. The meeting took place in a serious, but not oppressive atmosphere, like a necessary pause that allowed Tone to momentarily step away from the pressures piling up around him. Sitting across from Hai, Tone did not rush. He took time to gather his thoughts before slowly laying out everything that had been happening within his family. He spoke of Trang's former boyfriend suddenly returning and demanding to claim the child, setting off a chain of consequences no one had anticipated. He went on to describe how the truth was revealed just as the wedding was approaching, at a moment when everything had seemed ready, leaving all plans suddenly fragile. Tone also mentioned the emotional shock that left his mother unable to remain composed, along with the heavy silence that had settled over the house, where unresolved tensions continued to smolder without a clear way out. Throughout his sharing, Tone could not hide the exhaustion and worry written across his face, though his voice remained carefully restrained, as if he were reminding himself to stay calm so as not to make matters worse. He admitted that everything had happened too quickly, one event following another within a short span of time, far beyond anything he had ever imagined, leaving him often confused and unsure where to begin untangling it all. Even so, amid the anxiety and pressure, Tone chose patience, believing that his family needed more time to sit together, listen, and look at the situation more clearly. He hoped that once emotions had settled, everyone could find a suitable path forward together, rather than making hasty decisions while everything was still in turmoil. The climax came in the middle of the night, when everything was still tangled and far from settled, as Trang suddenly called to say that her water had broken. The call cut through the stillness of the late night, startling Tone, his heart sinking in that instant. The news was so abrupt that it left him frozen for a few seconds, his mind blank before panic rushed in. Without time to think, Tone sprang to his feet, hurriedly gathering the necessary belongings, his hands fumbling as every movement became rushed and disorderly. In that moment, there was no room in his thoughts for anything else. Everything narrowed down to a single urgency: getting Trang to the hospital as quickly as possible. In that haste, Tone quickly rushed Trang to the delivery ward, every passing minute carrying a growing sense of tension and weight. The air inside the car was thick with anxiety, mingled with quickened breaths and an unspoken silence that was hard to put into words. With the wedding drawing closer by the day, family conflicts still unresolved, and so many matters left unfinished and without answers, this sudden event struck like a forceful push, releasing all the emotions that had long been held in check. Worry, apprehension, and overwhelming emotion intertwined, enveloping everyone involved and propelling Tone into a decisive moment, one in which no one could continue to avoid, hesitate, or delay facing the reality unfolding before them. On the way to the hospital, Tone barely spoke. The two of them sank into a long, heavy silence, as if any words at that moment would have been unnecessary. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles tensing with each unconscious squeeze, a cold stiffness spreading through his fingertips. He kept his eyes fixed straight ahead, focused on the road unfolding in the darkness, as though the slightest lapse would cause everything around him to slip out of control. The car sped through the late night, the steady hum of the engine blending with the scattered sounds of sparsely populated streets. Streetlights flashed past in short intervals, yet everything seemed distant in Tone's perception, blurred and fragmented. His mind was in turmoil, thoughts overlapping and colliding, appearing one after another, never fully formed before being pushed aside by the next. He worried about Trang, about the pain and anxiety she was enduring in that moment, sensed clearly in her quickened breaths beside him, even without words. He worried, too, about the child about to be born, a life arriving too suddenly, at a time when everything was still tangled and far from ready. Deep within Tone, these worries did not exist separately but layered into a single, persistent weight. They merged with thoughts of his family, of conflicts yet unresolved, of his mother's cold silence, and of the wedding drawing ever closer. All of it pressed down on him quietly, making each stretch of road feel longer, slower, and heavier in his mind as he drove on. At home, Tone's mother lay facing the wall, her body motionless on the bed, as if she were too exhausted even to turn over. Her eyes remained open in the darkness, fixed on some indistinct point before her, unable to fall asleep. The room was steeped in a thick, oppressive quiet, so complete that she could clearly hear the faint ticking of the clock, the soft draft slipping through the crack in the door, and even her own heavy breathing. When the sound of a car engine stirred in the yard, then slowly rolled away and faded into the night, she did not need to look to know that Tone had taken Trang to the hospital to give birth. The sound lasted only a brief moment, yet it was enough to tighten her chest and weigh down her heart, as if something had just slipped beyond her reach, drifting away with no chance of being held back. Inside her, emotions tangled and overlapped, difficult to name and even harder to separate. The anger was still there, smoldering and heavy, not yet eased after everything that had happened. Sadness crept in slowly, not in waves, but with a persistent grip, clinging to her through a sense of hurt and disappointment she had nowhere to release. Interwoven with it was an undeniable worry for her son, carrying far too much pressure on his shoulders, worry for the child about to be born into such a tangled situation, and worry for the unknown that lay ahead. All of these emotions blended together, pressing down on her into a prolonged sense of helplessness as she realized that things had gone too far, beyond anything she had ever believed she could arrange or control. Lying in the darkness, Tone's mother understood clearly that from this moment on, certain things had begun and could no longer be turned back to how they once were. Though anger and sadness still lingered, and there remained so much she could not yet accept, she also knew that time waits for no one. Whether she wanted to or not, whether she felt ready or was still avoiding it, she would have to face the changes that were coming and the truths that could no longer be escaped. That realization surfaced slowly in her mind, not loudly, not violently, but with enough depth and weight to keep her awake, lying still through the long night, quietly confronting herself. The next morning, Tusan still woke up early, just as she did every day, following a routine that had repeated itself for so long it had become an inseparable part of her life. While the sky had not yet fully brightened, the light outside remained soft and muted, and the surroundings were still quiet. Tusan rose, quietly preparing everything. Her morning tasks unfolded slowly and automatically, carried out by habit, as if her body had memorized each step on its own. She took Ivy to school as usual, the familiar roads stretching out before them, each step steady and unbroken. Tusan reminded her child of simple things in a gentle voice, unhurried, no different from countless mornings before. Watching Ivy walk through the school gate, her small figure gradually disappearing among her classmates, Tusan lingered for a moment before turning back. Once home, she rolled up her sleeves and went out to the garden, cutting gourds and gathering bananas, every movement neat and familiar. The gourds and bunches of bananas were arranged carefully, ready to be taken to the market as on any other day. At the market, people continued to come and go in their usual flow, the lively atmosphere unchanged. Greetings and bargaining echoed back and forth, transactions followed one another, forming the rhythm of everyday life. Tusan stood at her stall, her hands moving quickly as she weighed the gourds, arranged the bananas, and spoke with customers in a calm, familiar tone. Everything around her carried on smoothly, as though nothing out of the ordinary were happening. Yet amid those familiar movements, a vague sense of unease stirred within Tusan. It was faint and indistinct, but enough for her to notice its presence. It was not quite a specific worry, more like a brief chill in the air, brushing past and causing her heart to sink for a moment. Amid the voices and laughter, amid the steady flow of buying and selling, that feeling quietly remained, threading itself through Tusan's thoughts, as if something somewhere nearby was beginning to change. Even though she could not yet see it or reach it in the middle of the market morning, while the flow of people continued without pause and buying and selling moved along with its familiar, unchanging rhythm. Tusan happened to overhear people whispering about a birth that had taken place. During the night, the story passed quietly between a few people standing close together, their voices not loud, yet clear enough to reach those nearby. No one told the full story, only scattered fragments about a family forced into hurried activity in the late hours, about urgency and worry arriving at the same time as happiness, causing everything to overlap in ways that were hard to predict. For a brief moment, the air around them seemed to grow heavier, before being quickly swept back into the usual noise of the crowded market, as if the story were just a fleeting fragment among countless other sounds. Tusan did not turn to ask more, nor did she step into those half-finished conversations. She remained where she was, quietly lowering her gaze to rearrange the vegetables in front of her, straightening each bundle carefully, and lining them up neatly, a habit deeply ingrained in her daily rhythm. Her hands continued to work steadily, each movement familiar and unhurried, betraying nothing out of the ordinary. Yet in that very brief moment, her heart unexpectedly sank, as though those passing words had lightly touched some corner of her thoughts that she herself had not yet named. Amid the noise, the familiarity, and the repetitive nature of the market, Tusan suddenly realized that some turning points in life do not arrive with dramatic events or thunderous sounds. They come quietly, slipping into one's life almost unnoticed, sometimes through nothing more than an overheard story or a fleeting thought. But once they arrive, whether one wishes it or not, no one can truly turn away and ignore them. The feeling was indistinct, simply lingering there, leaving within Tusan a vague, unnamed emptiness, like a gentle reminder that certain changes were drawing very near, slow but inevitable.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người, lại là mình đây. Mình đang tập trung tìm một cái tiêu đề ok một xíu. Cảm ơn mọi người đã theo dõi video của mình nha. Nhiều chưa ta? Tạm biệt mọi người.